All right, welcome everybody, and thank you for signing up for tonight's program. My name is Sarah Augustine, and I am the archivist at Whitesbog Preservation Trust, and I also coordinate our oral history program, Harvesting Stories. And as part of our grant for this year's round from the New Jersey Council for the Humanities, we have a speaker series, and this is the third installment of that. And tonight's program is called Tunes and Tales from Whitesbog and the Pines. And Dave Orleans is a songwriter, a storyteller. He actually lived at Whitesbog at one point, and he was the chair of the Folklife Committee. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Dave. Just a note, also, if you have any questions at any point during the presentation, you can put them into the chat below. I'll start something so that you see where it is. And just keep your mics muted, and we can have discussion at the end. Enjoy.
All right, thank you. Well, hi everybody. My name's Dave Orleans. I'll give you a little background about myself, and I'm going to be trying to change my background screen for different parts of the program. So if it doesn't work perfectly, just give me a couple of seconds and I'll get it between the different screens. Anyway, I grew up in New Jersey. And basically was pretty much a lifelong resident until I retired as a park naturalist in Camden County, and then moved to Portland, Oregon. But before that, I was also a resident of the village and was a board member of the Whitesbog Preservation Trust, and for a couple of years I was the president of the trust. And then we left in about 2005, so we were all the way across the country, but I came back a couple of times to perform at some of the blueberry festivals. But anyway, since I've lived in New Jersey all my life, I'd like to tell you a little bit about how I learned about the Pine Barrens. Actually, I didn't learn about it. I experienced it without knowing what it was when I was a kid, because we lived up in North Jersey, and we would go to the Jersey Shore in the summertime, and it was a long trip, a couple of hours drive, which was boring for any kid. And we get on the turnpike, no, the Garden State Parkway, it would take us, past all the buildings and the industrial areas, and then the scenery would change, and all of a sudden I'd see there was sand along the road, and there was all these pine trees growing. I thought, sand? We must be near the beach. And I would ask my dad, are we there yet? It's a perennial kid's question when you're on a long trip. And of course, we still had an hour to go, but that was the Pine Barrens we were driving through. And I figure kids of all generations have learned about the Pine Barrens from that long trip to the beach, where they said, are we there yet? And it was just that time that they were in the Pine Barrens, waiting to get to the beach. So when I grew up, and I lived in North Jersey most of my life, and then I got inducted into the Army and was stationed at Fort Dix. And when I wasn't on duty, I liked to explore some of the sandy roads. And it turns out that Whitesbog is right off Range Road. Well, not quite right off, but the Whitesbog Road was a little sandy road that came from Range Road, and I was amazed when I finally got through a couple of miles of Pine Barrens ecology, and it opened up into this little quaint little village that looked like it was from another era. And it turned out that was Whitesbog. That was my first experience with Whitesbog. And I met one of the people that was there. They were running the Conservation and Environmental Study Center, Dr. Vivian, and John Hyros was the assistant director. And I guess he was the person, I'm pretty sure, that I met that first time. And he told me, you're interested in environmental education? There's a program down the road at Glassboro. And so I signed up as soon as I got out of the Army and became a naturalist after that. So that's my story. But and I basically have had a fondness for Whitesbog Village ever since. And I started doing a lot of research about the history of the village and the people that lived there and the kind of agriculture that was really important and started at Whitesbog. So anyway, I'd like to do a song that's it's called the Pine Barrens song. And I think most people who have studied the Pine Barrens, the history of the Pine Barrens, it turned out that the Pine Barrens was not conducive to farming at all. The soil was sandy and barren, and a lot of pine trees and oak trees were about all that grew there, at least as far as most folks knew. But of course, it also was where two of the three native fruits were in this country. The cranberry and the blueberry were native to the Pine Barrens. The Concord grape was the other fruit that the Europeans found when they first came here, but that was up in northern areas. So anyway, this song is sort of an ode to the good old days, or the old days of the Pine Barrens. And even though people lived there, a lot of them were a little they were reclusive, I guess you could say, because a lot of them may have descended from people who just wanted to hide out from polite society. As far as I can figure, there were escaped slaves, Native Americans that didn't want to go onto the reservation, people that were just hiding out from the law, and unless you were in a polite society, you probably wanted to get away, and that was a good place to hide, in the Pine Barrens. But at some point, people began to realize that the Pine Barrens has some ecological and cultural significance, and at some point, people started being proud to be Pineys, as everybody called them. So this is I guess you could call it a piney song, a song about the people of the Pine Barrens. I left the place where I was born many years ago, 'cause times were hard and work was scarce. I had no choice but go, but I've been back there many times in my memories. Of all the places I have seen, it's there I'd rather be, where the scrub pine, ground oak, berry bush and sand, they never change, they never will, my Pine Barrens land. The sweet May pink and the curly fern, leaves all turning green, and the water running red in the cedar swamp stream. Pine smoke from the wood fire blowing on the wind, lamplight on the window, shining once again. Wagon up a one-room school and a country store, folks you used to know. Times have changed and they were gone a long, long time ago. But the scrub pine, ground oak, berry bush and sand, they never change, they never will, my Pine Barrens land. The sweet May pink and the curly fern, leaves all turning green, and the water running red in the cedar swamp streams. Wagon roads that run for miles down through the twisted pines, past little long forgotten towns that failed the test of time. Sometimes there along the way, granite markers cold and gray mark the only ones who stayed there in the barrens, where the scrub pine, ground oak, berry bush and sand, they never change, they never will, my Pine Barrens land. The sweet May pink and the curly fern, leaves all turning green, and the water running red in the cedar swamp streams, down in the Pine Barrens. Well, that was written by a guy named Maurice Ridgway Sr. He formed a trio with a couple of friends of his, and let me give you a shot of what his group looked like, if I can find it. He and his buddies used to play locally and at local dances and on the radio. And in 1941, that woman up there at the top of the screen, Dorothea Dix Lawrence, who was a folklorist and opera singer and a radio personality, she was able to get them to come and play at the National Folk Festival in Washington, D.C. in 1941. I don't know if they sang that song. I know it's copyrighted in 1977, but they may have been singing it that early as well. So anyway, I'd like to, oops, I want to change the screen again, hold on. Okay. There we go. So what you see behind me are cranberry separators invented by J.J. White. And the cranberries had to be sorted, separate the rotten ones from the good ones. And J.J. White, who basically was the cranberry king, as some people called him. He literally wrote the book about cranberries. Let's see if we can, I have to put it down here, I guess. He literally wrote the book on cranberries. Oops, it's called Cranberry Culture. I don't know if you can see that. And it was written in the 1880s, I think. And he did a lot of research on growing cranberries and invented this cranberry separator. Long before he was involved with cranberries, there was another man who was probably one of the first cranberry growers in New Jersey. His name was John Webb, and he had a wooden leg, so people called him Peg Leg John. He was a school teacher who lived in Cassville, and in 1845 he was the first to cultivate cranberries. And because of his wooden leg, he had, I guess you might call it a disadvantage, but I think to him it was an advantage, because he was also a keen observer of the cranberries, and he learned that walking around in the cranberry swamps, the wild swamps, if he poked his pegged leg into the ground and broke off cranberry vines, they'd continue to grow. And it turned out that was a way to plant new cranberry vines, by poking them into the ground. He also found out, since he had his cranberries kept cool up in the attic of one of his buildings, his way of getting them down, since he only had one good leg, was to pour them down the attic stairs, and he found out that some of them made it all the way down. The good ones made it all the way down, and the rotten ones splatted on the steps. So he found what now is called the bounce factor, and it is the basis for all of the separating machines that exist now for cranberry growers. So I wrote a song for old John Webb, and so I'd like to do it right now. Oops. Well, old John Webb was a cover road man, walking around on his cranberry land. Poor John Webb only had one leg, attached to the other was a wooden peg. Peg Leg John made himself a name, that old wooden leg was claim to fame. Folks all said it was quite a shame, but Peg Leg John made himself a name. Made the cranberries bounce, cranberry bounce, do the cranberry bounce. Well, old John Webb was walking around, poking that peg right into the ground, breaking off pieces of cranberry vine. When he came back, found them grow just fine. Peg Leg John lived high on the hog, found a new way to plant his cranberry bog. Twice as easy as falling off a log. Peg Leg John lived high on the hog. Made the cranberries bounce, cranberry bounce, do the cranberry bounce. Well, old John Webb was nobody's fool. He stored his berries where it was cool. Bright red fruit his attic he filled, was the perfect place to keep 'em chilled. Peg Leg John had a heck of a time, carrying boxes one at a time. Up and down those stairs he'd climb. Peg Leg John had a heck of a time. Made the cranberries bounce, cranberry bounce, do the cranberry bounce. Well, John Webb's working late one night, putting up berries by lantern light. His peg leg knocking on a rickety board, spilled cranberries all over the floor. Peg Leg John had himself a scare, cranberries bounced down the attic stair. Gave him a start and made him swear, old Peg Leg John made himself a scare. Made the cranberries bounce, cranberry bounce, do the cranberry bounce. Well, John Webb took a look around. Good firm berries bounced all the way down. Found a mess of cranberries all over the stairs. The soft rotten fruit didn't bounce anywhere. Peg-leg John, now he understood a new way to separate the bad from the good. Bounciest berries in the neighborhood. Peg-leg John, now he understood. Making cranberries bounce. As the cranberries bounce. Yeah, the cranberries bounced, yeah. Old John Webb is a legend, they say. To every cranberry grower today. Fresh berries to market, the ripest all glean. By bouncing over hurdles in a sorting machine. Peg-leg John made himself a name. The bounce factor was his claim to fame. Cranberries had never been quite the same. This Peg-leg John made himself a name. Made the cranberries bounce. Do the cranberries bounce? Oh yeah, yeah, the cranberries bounce. Oh yeah. So he was probably the most inventive of the cranberry growers, and he deserves a lot of credit for what he was able to do with cranberries. And I'm going to change my background here because I'd like to show you a cranberry bog. This is a great picture from, I think it's like the 1880s. A cranberry bog from Ocean County. And if I can get out of the way enough, you can probably see there were all sorts of folks gathered there to pick cranberries, and they had to be picked by hand, and the field had to be dry for them to pick. So they were picking on their hands and knees, and they needed lots of people to pick them. As a matter of fact, over here, let's see, I'm trying to go, here, there we go. If you can look back there in the background, you can see that there are lots of horse carts and look like Conestoga wagons, kind of. All the people coming from their own homes to pick, make a little money, and maybe take some cranberries home with them as well. So I found this song in an album by Dylan Buston. It's called The Cranberry Boggs, and it was written by as a poem sometime in the late 1800s, and he talked about the Bohemians, the Irish, the Yankees, and Dutch who picked the cranberries, but it seemed to fit really well just by substituting some local folks like Quakers, Italians, and Pineys and such. And with a couple of small changes, it became a New Jersey song to me. Goes like this. Well, you ask me to sing, and I'll sing you a song of how in the marshes we all get along. Quakers, Italians, and Pineys and such. In the cranberry bogs you will find a whole clutch. Did you ever go down to the cranberry bogs? Some of the houses are hewn out of logs, with walls made of board from the cedars and pines that grow in the country called the cranberry clime. When the hay it is cut and the wheat it is stacked, cranberries ripen, so our old clothes we'll pack, and away to the marshes to rake we will go, and dance to the music of the fiddle and bow. And did you ever go down to the cranberry bogs? Some of the houses are hewn out of logs, with walls made of boards from the cedars and pines that grow in the country called the Cranberry Climb. Well, away down to Upton our tickets we'll buy. To all the families we will bid goodbye. For profit and fun our plans to resign. For 3 or 4 weeks in the Cranberry Climb. And did you ever go down to the Cranberry Boggs? Some of the houses are hewn out of logs, with walls made of boards from the cedars and pines that grow in the country called the Cranberry Climb. Well, in all day in the marshes our rakes we will pull. We feel the best when our boxes are full. And in the evening we'll dance till we're all tired out, and wish the cranberries would never give out. And did you ever go down to the Cranberry Boggs? Some of the houses are hewn out of logs, with walls made of boards from the cedars and pines that grow in the country called the Cranberry Climb. Well, you asked me to sing, and so I've sung you a song of how in the marshes we all get along. The Quakers, Italians, and Pineys, and such. In the Cranberry Boggs you will find a whole clutch. And did you ever go down to the Cranberry Boggs? Some of the houses are hewn out of logs, with walls made of boards from the cedars and pines that grow in the country called the Cranberry Climb. So eventually cranberries have gotten mechanized, so there's not so much of a need for so many people, but going for that background again. So I'd like to tell you a story about somebody who did a lot of research here in the Pine Barrens in the late 1930s and early 1940s. His name was Herbert Halpert, and he collected folk songs and folk tales from New Jersey, from the Pine Barrens specifically. And given the reticence of some of the locals to actually talk to outside folks, he had a hard time even pinning down where the Pine Barrens was. He'd heard a lot about the music and the tales that came from the people that lived there, but he had a hard time finding the place because I think coming from the north, I'm assuming he drove south on something like Route 206, and as he would go down and the houses gave way to woods and pine trees and oaks, and he'd get down into the countryside, and there'd be a farm stand on the side of the road. He'd pull over and say, "Hey, can you tell me where the Pine Barrens are?" And they say, "Oh yeah, you go down south another couple of miles." And so he'd get back in his car and he'd drive down a little farther. You'd see a gas station on the side of the road, and he'd pull over and ask the local attendant, "Can you tell me how to get to the Pine Barrens?" He said, "Oh yeah, you go down about a couple of miles, and you can't miss it." So he did that a number of times on the way down. Everybody kept telling him, "Oh yeah, just a little farther. You're not there. You're not in the Pine Barrens." So he drove for a while, came upon another fruit stand or vegetable stand, and he pulled over and asked the guy, I've been driving all day, and I've been looking for the Pine Barrens. Could you tell me where they are?" He said, "Oh yeah, you got to go back up the road about 5 or 6 miles, and you can't miss it." Well, eventually he did find it, but people just didn't want to be associated with the pines. Nobody wanted to be considered a piney until his research and the establishment of the Pinelands National Reserve and a lot of studies on ecology and folklore and folk life in the Pine Barrens made people realize they could be proud to be pineys. So his research actually came after the fact for me, because I had found a couple of references to blueberries in there was a book called Jersey Genesis that talked about Herbert Halpert having interviewed this guy and finding out that there was a song about the huckleberry tree. Now, huckleberries don't grow on trees, but the swamp huckleberries, which are actually blueberries, are tall in the swamps. They can be taller than a person, and you have to bend them down to pick the blueberries. So the wild blueberries were tall enough that this guy had written, or his friend had written a song and made up a song. He didn't say he wrote it down. He made it up about the turn of the century, and he called it the huckleberry tree. So, and then I found another reference to cranberry bushes and huckleberry bushes and cranberry vines. The prettiest girls live down in the pines. And I thought, those two they would be a good basis for a song about blueberries, the wild Jersey blueberries. So I did a little research, and I found that there's some lyrics that say the sheep-topped wagons, and those wagons that were in the corner of the Cranberry Bog picture were probably those wagons, the sheep-topped wagons that took them to the swamps to pick the berries from the huckleberry tree. So at any rate, here is what I call the Jersey Blues, and long after I wrote the song, I did find out that Herbert Halpert had made recordings. So I heard both of those, the two verses from the Huckleberry Tree song and the couplet that I found in an old cranberry grower's journal. He also collected that. It turned out to be part of a bawdy song, but the unbawdy part is in mine. So it's called the Jersey Blues. I've got the Jersey blues, but that ain't bad. They're the sweetest blues this boy has ever had. If I could only have my wishes, give me Jersey blues, the berries so delicious. Well, I take my pail down to the riverside in the middle of July. First I'd fill my pail and then I'd stuff my face, and right back home I'd fly. I got the Jersey blues, but that ain't bad. 'Cause they're the sweetest blues this boy has ever had. If I could only have my wishes, give me Jersey blues, the berries so delicious. Soon the sheep-topped wagons to the swamps will go, loads of berry pickers seated all in a row. They jump into the picket and whistle merrily, scooping up the treasures of the huckleberry tree. I got the Jersey blues, but that ain't bad. 'Cause they're the sweetest blues this boy has ever had. If I could only have my wishes, give me Jersey blues, blues, the berries so delicious. The huckleberry bushes and cranberry vine, prettiest girls live down in the pines. When we were young and so carefree, we stole a kiss under the huckleberry tree. I got the Jersey blues, but that ain't bad. They're the sweetest blues this boy has ever had. If I could only have my wishes, give me Jersey blues, the berries so delicious. Where the short scrubbed oak and the tall standing pine, the dark green cedar, that's a favorite of mine. Of all the forest beauties in South Jersey, none can compare to the huckleberry tree. I got the Jersey blues, that ain't bad, 'cause they're the sweetest blues this boy's ever had. If I could only have my wishes, with me Jersey blues, the berries so delicious. I said, give me Jersey blues, the berries so delicious. All righty. Well, somebody else who was pretty instrumental in the history of Whitesbog was the daughter of J.J. White, his oldest daughter, Elizabeth White. And she grew up in the Whitesbog area. They lived in, I forget the name of the town, had a big house, and her dad would come every weekend, work, monitor the cranberries, and she basically got her start learning about cranberries as a kid, and then eventually she saw all these blueberries that grew wild on the sides of the cranberry bogs in the slightly higher, drier margins. And every summer, when the blueberries were ripe, all the cranberry workers that worked there during the rest of the year would stop what they were doing and go out and pick blueberries. And she really wanted to turn that into a crop as well. But they couldn't figure out how to grow them. So this is the story of her life. She eventually became so famous that people called her the Blueberry Queen for all of the things that she did to basically create a new farm crop in New Jersey. Not wild blueberries, but cultivated high bush blueberries. So this is a song that I call the Blueberry Queen, and it's made up of a lot of her writings, some phrases in some of her letters and her articles that she wrote. And there's one part in it where it talks about she went out or she put out the word for all sorts of local woodsmen to come and bring her to berries, to great berry bushes. And the one berry bush that turned out to be the mainstay of blueberry growing in South Jersey was a berry that was discovered by a young guy named Reuben Leake. And she named the berries for the people who had showed them to her, but nobody wanted to call it the Rube berry or the Leake berry. So Frederick Coville, who was a scientist, that helped her perfect the cultivated blueberry. He got the idea of slamming an L on the end of rube, and it became a ruble, which sounded a lot like money, good value to that naming. So here is the Blueberry Queen. Her name was Elizabeth, some called her Miss White. She made the Pine Barrens her home. She played as a child where blueberries grew wild, and never far did she roam. To the bogs where her father's cranberries did grow, each day after school she would run. In summer blueberries, cranberries in fall, she'd pick for a while just for fun. She was a blueberry queen who followed a dream. The future she held in her hands, and with mothering care made the berry bush bear the sweetest fruit in the land. Now father and daughter both shared a dream. Wandering the fields they would go, with the sun at their backs to give them best light. They'd watch all the cranberries grow. As sisters and friends into womanhood grew, they each took the hand of a man. But Elizabeth blew like a blueberry flower and gave her life to the land. She was a blueberry queen who followed a dream. The future she held in her hand, and with mothering care made the berry bush bear the sweetest fruit in the land. In summer the pine folk would all leave their work to pick the wild huckleberries. And Elizabeth wished with every sweet taste to grow berries as wondrous as these. And then she learned of a man, Frederick Colville by name, who could make the wild berry bush grow. Wrote him in Washington to tell of her dream, and away to the pines he did go, where he found a blueberry queen who followed a dream. The future she held in her hands, and with mothering care made the berry bush bear the sweetest fruit in the land. Offered a bounty all through the pines to woodsmen of local renown, who could lead her to bushes out in the swamps where the biggest berries were found. And the best they were named for their finders, it's true, like Adams and Harding and Sam. The jewel of the wild bush, the pride of Fruit Bleak, became a ruble in Elizabeth's hand. For she was a blueberry queen who followed a dream. The future she held in her hands, and with mothering care made the berry bush bear the sweetest fruit in the land. Here's to the women who learned the best way to catch a young gentleman's eye. They thank Miss Elizabeth, then they roll out the dough for a luscious fresh blueberry pie. She was a blueberry queen who followed a dream. The picture she held in her hands, and with mothering care made the berry bush bear the sweetest fruit in the land. Yeah, Elizabeth White, she met Herbert Halpert, the folklorist who was looking for tales and stories and songs, and she was able to put him on the right road to get some of those. Now, for years and years, cranberries and blueberries were grown on the farms surrounding Whitesbog Village. Eventually, they moved the headquarters of their farm across the highway, Route 70, and the buildings might have fallen in disrepair at Whitesbog if it weren't for the efforts of Eugene Vivian, who was a professor at Glassboro, and he turned it into an environmental education center that focused on history and ecology of the Pine Barrens. And so that was the village that I found when I first discovered Whitesbog. But it was no longer the village where all of the family lived, the White family and the Fenwicks and Darlingtons and all the other folks who were part of the company town. Now they were able to preserve a lot of the buildings, but there's some that never made it. I think early on, after the state acquired the land from J.J. White Cranberry and Blueberry Company, they bulldozed some of the workers' villages out in the middle of the Cranberry Boggs. Rome and Florence were two villages that used to be around, and I think the buildings were taken down because they were afraid that vandals might get in and burn them down. Well, the largest building was the Cranberry Packing House, which really was quite a sight in its day. From what I understand, it was actually the largest agricultural building in New Jersey, if not the United States. But over the years, it has lost some of its luster. There, okay. I wanted to put a picture in the background. It was the largest agricultural structure, and it had three sections. The two end sections, oops, there they are, were where they stored cranberries, and then the middle section was, it's hard to do that. The middle section was where they would separate berries and pack them up and get them to market. So it looked that way probably in the 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s. If you see at the bottom, there's not much left of it. It was always going to cost more than the Whitesbog Trust could ever raise, or the state was willing to put out to try and restore or at least even shore up the building. So when I was leaving, I think when I left in 2005, that's the way it looked behind me, the bottom picture. But I wrote a song based on or stole the tune from an old traditional song called "The Maid on the Shore," but I call it the Cranberry Cathedral. Maybe it's like a eulogy for this once fine old building that basically was the center of life at Whitesbog in a lot of ways. And the term Cranberry Cathedral, I found in an article about Cranberry architecture, the buildings that made up Cranberry Farms. It was by somebody named Mary Ann Thompson. But I thought that was a great evocative name for the packing house, so I wrote a song about the packing house, the Cranberry Cathedral. You may call me the grand old man of Whitesbog. I've been standing here 100 years. Cranberry Cathedral to the village around. And in me you have stored all your hopes and your fears. You've stored all your hopes and your fears. I've seen summer swallows swoop over the bogs above nodding pink cranberry blossoms. Heard the chorus at night of Pine Barrens tree frogs. Stood silently guarding the ice-covered vines. Stood silently guarding the vines. I've basked in the sun many crisp autumn morns, while waiting for the dew to dry. Heard the laughter and the chatter of the lively families as they went out each day to the bogs to work, each day to the bogs to their work. You may call me the keeper of the autumn harvest, of cranberries culled from the vines. I've seen thousands of barrels of that crimson fruit go off on their journey all round the world, their journey all round the world. For a century I've stood a most faithful watch over bogs in the heart of the Barrens. But the wind whistles through, and the rain rots my wood. I know that the end of my days could be near, that the end of my days could be near. So come all ye villagers, lend me a hand, shore up all my sagging timbers. Without your commitment and kind caring hand, I surely will crumble into decay. I'll surely crumble into decay. You may call me the grand old man of Whitesbog. I've been standing here 100 years. A Cranberry Cathedral to the village around. In me you have stored all your hopes and your fears. You've stored all your hopes and your fears. Okay, well, let's see what kind of time we were. Hey, I'm not too bad. I got about 10 or so minutes left of doing stuff. So I have a song I'd like to sing, and I'd like to tell you some stories about the most famous Pine Barrens resident. He even got a hockey team named after him, the Jersey Devil. And I understand that at sometime in the 40s or so, he even found his way to Whitesbog, and somebody reported some strange, too big to be human footprints out in the bogs. The sheriffs came and tried to figure out what this creature was that vaguely looked like bear footprints. But of course, they followed the bear footprints and they stopped at a tire track. And the tire track went off in the bog. So it was a hoax, at least that's what people say. But the Jersey Devil and the stories have been around for a long, long time. I think they date the stories to about the 1740s, when he was said to have been born at Leeds Point, right on the coastline of South Jersey. And so, oops. So I had been trying to tell the story, or trying to figure out a good way to tell the story of the Jersey Devil. And there were so many different versions, it was hard to know how to couch the whole story. And so I wrote a song. I call it Devil of the Pines. And oops. And I would go and sing it at programs. I think I went to a church supper one time, and they had me singing songs about New Jersey and the Pine Barrens, and it might have been an iffy place to sing a song about the devil, but it wasn't the devil, it was the Jersey Devil. At any rate, after I did my program and was packing up, this woman came over and she said, "Oh yeah, I grew up in the Pine Barrens, and I've heard those stories about the Jersey Devil for, all my life. I don't believe in the Jersey Devil, but," and I knew she was going to tell me a story. She said, "Yeah, when I was a young girl, I lived in Greenbank, New Jersey, right in the part of the Pine Barrens, and it was this tiny little town, and she said, well, when I would ride my bike along the only paved road, it was all rutted and messed up and old and hadn't been paved in years, and so it wasn't much fun riding my bike, but one day the road crew came and they started working on it, and in a couple of weeks they had repaved this little road that went through the center of Greenbank and right past the school and the municipal building, and she took off riding that bike on this smooth as glass new pavement. It was like heaven, she said, practically flying. So, of course, since it's such a great road, she just kept on going. She went over the bridge across the Mullica River and way down, miles down the road, before she realized that it was getting dark. And just as it was getting dark, she realized she's going to have to turn around and come back in the dark. And she looked around, and she was in the middle of a cedar swamp. Trees, big cedar trees on both sides of her, blocking out the sun that was setting. So it was getting pretty dark already. And cedar swamps are known for being huge trees growing close together with not much access between the trees. So it was hard for anybody to really go through to walk in a cedar swamp. It was impossible, basically. She turned around her bike and she got back on and started home. And at that moment, she could hear in the swamp something that sounded like somebody crashing through the swamp, following right along with her. Well, she got a little scared and she started speeding up a little bit on her bike, and the crashing sound followed right alongside of her. Well, she went another mile or two, and this thing followed her all the way. She zoomed across the bridge, made it home in record time that night, threw her bike down and ran into the house, wondering what had followed her home that night. Now, she doesn't believe that it was the Jersey Devil, but she doesn't know what it really was. And I kind of think maybe he was there. Was watching out for her to make sure she made it home all right. That's what I like to say. Well, another time I did a program for the Atlantic Audubon Society, and they were having an outdoor evening picnic and gathering, and probably going to go out doing some night birding. I sang "The Devil of the Pines" at that group, and the head of the the Atlantic Audubon Society came up to me, a real macho guy. His name is Jim Jones. He said, you know, that's a great story. I have to tell you, I don't believe in the Jersey Devil, but, and I knew he was going to tell me a story. He said, a couple of buddies and I, we were out in a section of the Pine Barrens, way off the main roads on these sugar sand roads. You had to be careful or have four-wheel drive, or else you'd get stuck in the sugar sand because it never really packs hard. So they were out there doing an all-day owl census, trying to identify owl signs, scat or owl pellets and things like that, or anything that would tell them who was living in that section of the Pine Barrens. They were having a bad day. They really didn't find much of anything, and it was getting dark. They decided, okay, let's go have a beer. They jumped in the car, driving down this sandy road that you have to drive about 10 miles an hour or else you might get stuck. And the lights dimming, and pretty soon they had to put their headlights on. As soon as they put their headlights on, it must have scared something off in the trees, and something swooped down and started flying ahead of them, just far enough away that they couldn't see what it was, but it had a wingspan as long as a man's arm, and it took up that whole sandy road, and every once in a while it would hit a low-hanging pine branch, and the needles would shower down, and they said, hey, let's see if that's an owl or something. And so they tried to speed up a little bit. They got a little closer, but they couldn't get close enough. They couldn't go fast enough to get close. But what they did see after they turned their headlights on was not only was it flying, but it was galloping along on the sand. These two legs were kicking up sand dust balls. So whatever it was flying and running or galloping or whatever. And one of the guys said, you know, could that couldn't be, could that be the Jersey Devil? Now, the other two guys in the car, they were ready to turn around and go home because they didn't want to see any Jersey Devil, but Jim said, all right, if this is the Jersey Devil, I want to be the one that finds out about him. So they started driving like crazy people. He was driving around the corners and skidding in the sand, and they almost got stuck a couple of times, but they couldn't get close enough. So they made a turn, and I guess whatever it was flew off the road. And they thought, oh, he's gone. Guess we'll never know. And then just at that moment, right through their headlights, crossing the sandy road, came this huge owl, a great horned owl, who had in his talons this giant cotton-tailed rabbit. And that rabbit was so big, the owl couldn't get up into the trees. And so his little dead feet, his little lifeless back feet were dancing on the sand, kicking up sand dust. So, of course, Jim says, yeah, that's what everybody sees when they see the Jersey Devil. But I'm not so sure. There have been plenty of encounters over the centuries that the Jersey Devil legend has been in existence. And so here is my story of the Jersey Devil. Come sit down by the campfire and try to keep warm while I tell of a man of such unearthly form in the deep cedar bogs where the moon never shines. They say there lives a devil Devil of the pines, devil of the pines. There once was an old woman who lived by the bay. She had a dozen children and another on the way. Some said she was a witch, that old mother leaves. But unlucky 13, even she did not need the devil of the pines. When she found that it was so, she wept and she mourned. She let loose a curse on her child yet unborn. She cried, "All ye spirits, come hearken unto me. If this child will be born, then a devil let it be." When the time grew near to the moment of his birth, storm clouds rolled over and they covered up the earth. The cries of a babe turned to a ghostly wail as an innocent young soul grew leather wings and forked her tail. The devil of the pine. Well, the deed it was done, and the demon was unleashed, escaping to the swamplands, any refuge he could reach. That night a dog ran off, chasing ghosts, the neighbors said. Under cover of the darkness, a hungry devil fed. The devil of the pines. And from the Jersey shore to Chatsworth, and on the road to Hatfield, every nighttime travel could hear the devil at his heel, shouting out the headlines the newsboy's voice would bring. Mothers, find your children, 'cause the devil is on the wing. The devil of the pines. Then one night when autumn winds rustled leaves upon the ground, came a beautiful young woman returning home from town. A tear was on her cheek, and her face it was cast down, because her love was lost at sea, and his body never found. But when she reached the ancient oak at the turning of the trail, in the branches high above her, she could hear a mournful wail. It was the devil who loomed above her, formed by some ungodly heart. But his words of pain and sorrow, they spoke right to her heart. And he said, "Cursed be the mother who brought me forth in such hate. And cursed be this loathsome shell that finally sealed my fate. Those I ask for kindness, they turn away in fright. In search of love and tenderness, I'm cursed to prowl the night. I'm the devil of the pine." Well, she listened, and she felt his words touch something in her soul. Two fragmented spirits in that moment became whole. For many years went by, and those who ventured out at night would swear beside the devil walked a woman dressed in white. Well, the devil lives forever, but not so the pretty maid. Still he keeps a vigil near the grave where she was laid. In memory of their friendship, he vowed he would attend to protection of their pine lands from the vagaries of men. The devil of the pine. Well, a kindness freely given, it enriches us by 10. But the poverty and greed and fear, sorry, the poverty of greed and fear, that's the legacy of men. These days the Jersey Devil must keep a watchful eye for those who'd steal his homeland. They're the devils of the pines, the devil of the pines. Whoa, devil, devil of the pines. Well, I will leave you with just one thought. That Jersey Devil, I like to think of him as a guiding spirit of the Pine Barrens, not somebody to be run away from. So when you're out visiting Whitesbog, visiting the Pine Barrens, hiking in the woods, enjoying the amazing place that is the Pine Barrens, watch out for the Jersey Devil and give him a high five for me when you see him, because he's out there. He's out there. He's probably the reason the Pine Barrens are still there and not filled with developments straight from here to Atlantic City. So with that, I will say goodnight, or at least I will turn it back to Sarah, and you're welcome to ask some questions or put it in the chat, or however we're going to do this. So, and thank you very much for letting me come and talk your ears off.
So yeah, if anybody wants to unmute their mics, if it's easier, if you have any questions or comments. I know I personally love your interpretation of the Jersey Devil. I never really thought of it that way, but it's nice to have a little bit of a guiding spirit with you when you're in the woods.
Yeah, right. He's a guardian devil.
Yeah. I'm just checking the chat to make sure we didn't have any questions through the
Oh, I
mail.
see somebody lives in Cassville. All right. That would be interesting to find out if you know more stuff about old peg-leg John Webb. Well, if you have any questions, I'd love to answer them or talk with you about stuff, and
Hi.
I'll be here for a little bit.
Hi, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
hi Lisa.
Hi, I'm Lisa Maynor. I'm on the board at Whitesbog right now. I love Whitesbog. But you were talking about a huckleberry tree,
Yeah.
a swamp huckleberry that was really a blueberry. Could you just?
Really, that before the botanists really had distinguished between the two. There was low bush huckleberry and high bush huckleberry, and they called it swamp huckleberry, but it grew in the swamps. It grew tall enough that, you would have to bend them over to pick the berries. And so locally, lots of folks called it the huckleberry tree, which was basically the swamp huckleberries, which were high bush blueberries, basically.
Oh, okay.
So botanists eventually distinguished between huckleberries and blueberries. I think, if I recall correctly, true huckleberries had crunchy seeds. So, it was little crunchy, sort of like when you eat a blackberry.
Right.
You get those little seeds crunching. But the blueberries had many more smaller seeds that didn't, that were not hard and crunchy. And so they realized there were two separate plants, two separate species or genus. I don't know exactly how it works, but they separated them. And so what they had always been calling huckleberries and the huckleberry tree, now were called high bush blueberries.
Oh, okay. Are there any that tall still in the area?
Any what?
Any as tall as a tree still around? I mean,
You know, I think if you go to some cedar swamp areas where there are wild huckleberries, some of them may be growing that tall. Oh, you know
Okay.
what? Actually, when I lived at Whitesbog, I lived at the superintendent's house, which is the house that's nearest the little paymaster's cottage that's in the circle.
Yes.
And we used to bring a half a gallon plastic jug uh, and go right behind our house. There was some abandoned blueberry fields, and you know they hadn't been pruned, they hadn't been trimmed for 50 years, so they were almost tree height. They were probably 10 feet tall, and
Oh,
we had to bend them over to pick the berries. But the berries were just as good as they would have been if it had been maintained as a field. Although some people said that if you pick the wild ones, you might get worms in them, but they chew up nice. So
Extra protein.
yes.
good protein.
Well,
Yeah.
that's neat. I have to go check that spot out. Thank you. It was
There
a
are a number
fabulous.
of blueberry fields that have stopped production, but they haven't cut down all the the bushes. So some of them, with pine trees growing above them, shaded and probably not in the best of situations, are still producing blueberries after, I don't know, 100 years maybe.
Okay.
Um, so if you go to Whitesbog and you see what looks like a kind of a forest with lots of, I found that they had rows of blueberries and they built up the rows to make them a little bit higher, and you can still see those rows in the forest that
Okay.
show that they had blueberries growing there.
Okay. Definitely have to go do some exploring.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was a fabulous performance.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Mhm.
Okay, what is that? What happened to the ruble you mentioned, the one Elizabeth named with the botanist? I think it is still uh, part of the heritage of a lot of the existing high bush blueberry bushes. Um, so there are rubles. They may not call them rubles because they've probably since been uh, hybridized with other varieties as well. So they may have new ones, but a lot of them had their their what do you call it? Their genealogy includes the ruble because it was a very hardy and well producing uh, bush, I think. I have recorded a bunch of those songs, not all of them because some of them aren't mine, but the ones that are mine, I did make a recording that I have never sold any, or at least haven't for 20 years. But if you're interested, I'd be glad to send you a link to a place you can download them from my Google Drive. So if someone is interested, you're welcome to send me an email address. My email address is earthsinger@comcast.net.
Put it into
And
the chat too so people can see it.
yeah, I see one there. I guess I'll save the chat when we finish, and then I'll have it. So yeah, I will send you a link.
You said earthsinger at Gmail, correct? Or at Comcast?
Well, earthsinger@comcast.net,
Okay.
but I do have an earthsinger1@gmail.com. But that's confusing. So the comcast.net, that's my best one. Yeah, there you go. So I'd say there are probably going to be a lot of other cool people presenting for the series. So you
Yeah.
should take a look, just take a listen to them. And you said, Sarah, you said that this might be on YouTube at some point in the future?
Eventually it will be.
Yeah,
So
okay.
it's recording right now.
Mhm.
And once it's processed and once we kind of get through the cycle of the other ones we have recorded,
Mhm.
they will be eventually posted on Whitesbog's YouTube page.
Oh, that sounds great. Perfect.
And our upcoming presentations for the rest of the speaker series, we have 2 more scheduled right now, 2 Fridays from now. So March 4th will be Sharon Goodman talking about growing up at Whitesbog. And while she did not grow up at Whitesbog, her parents did, and she has some amazing stories and family pictures to share with us then. And
That sounds
also
good.
on March 18th, we have Bill Bolger, who knows a lot about some of the stuff Dave was talking about today. He was very active with the preservation planning and just general history research work at Whitesbog. So that'll be another very interesting one. And again, just like with this performance, it is free to members and $5 to non-members. And if you do want to become a member, if you're not already, it is only $20 for new members, and that's for a year of membership. It can get you into programs for free and just other special perks. And it also supports the ongoing preservation of Whitesbog, which is a place very dear to all of our hearts. So thank you guys for coming tonight. And I think I saw another question pop up while I was talking.
Will I be visiting Whitesbog anytime soon? Probably not. I have my youngest sister lives in Brick. And at this point, all the rest of my family has moved to other places. So we have a lot of family in North Carolina. So I'll be visiting there when I go to the East Coast. At some point, I would like to go visit Whitesbog again. The last time I was there, nobody was there. I just popped in on a Monday because I was attending a wedding up in North Jersey and thought I'd just bop in and see if anybody was around. Nobody was around, but it looked the same. Whitesbog looked the same as when I left. Although I didn't look at the packing house, so I don't know if there's much of anything left of the packing house anymore.
It's a bit of a pile right now.
Yeah, a pile. Well, thanks a lot for you guys coming and listening, and hope to get back to Whitesbog eventually. Maybe sometime for a blueberry festival or something.
We would love that.
Yeah. So, unless there are other questions, I'm gonna say thanks a lot and bye bye everybody.
Yeah, thank you,
Down for the
Dave, and
Jersey
thank you,
Devil.
everybody. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night. Okay, now.